Problems and solution on process costing using Excel. So myself, Professor Mahesh Bendigiri from Global Business School, Hubli. So before we start, let's look into the questions. So on my left hand side we have questions, and on my right hand side, so I created the templates for solving the problem in order to save the time. So whenever we are solving a problems on process costing, so we need to keep certain points in our mind in terms of how the material is moving from one process to the other process, and is there a normal loss in any of this process. If along with the normal loss, then is there any abnormal loss or abnormal gain. So based on that, we need to again find out what is the value of this abnormal loss and abnormal gain if it is so. So in order to understand all these things, first we'll start understanding the basics. So what I have done is I have selected the first problem, a simple one, for us to understand how the process accounts are maintained. Product passes through three different processes to completion. These processes are numbered A, B and C respectively. During the week ended Jan 2009, 500 items were produced. The following information is obtained. So here in terms of how many units were put into the first process, so what is the output of the first process, those things they are not mentioned. In all, when the material has been infused in the process, so finally when the product is manufactured, how many quantity they have manufactured, that they have mentioned, that is 500 items. So in this case, if you observe here, material in first process 3000, second process 1500, third process that is 1000. So labor cost 2500, 2000 and 2500 rupees. Direct expenses is 500, 100 and 500. The indirect expenses for the period is mentioned as 1400. This is apportioned to the process on the basis of wages. So whatever the wages is given here, 2500, 2000 and 2500, you have to find the ratio of these three process labor cost, and based on that we need to apportion this 1400. So let's start with the preparation of process account. So when you are preparing a process account, since there are three processes, so we need to create a three process accounts. So process A, process B and process C. So particulars, cost per unit, amount. So here I have not mentioned in terms of one more column, that is quantity, because in this problem, so they are not mentioned in terms of how much quantity of input is infused in first, second and third process, like that. So I ignored it. So if there is a requirement, if they are given information, then we can consider it. Otherwise, cost per unit and amount column is sufficient. So to begin with, first one, material, labor, direct expenses for process A is given. But before we actually start doing it, we need to understand there is one small working note. Indirect expenses for the period is 1400. Since this amount need to be apportioned between all the three processes, I will do with one working note. So let's do one small working note, that is computation of indirect expense of process A, B and C. So since there are three processes A, B, C, the labor cost of these three processes is mentioned as 2500, next is 2000 and 2500. Now if I find out what is the ratio of these labor cost, so this comes to, if I remove two zeros, two zeros from each of these, I get 25, 20 and 25. So accordingly it comes to 5:4:5. You know, it becomes total is 14. So the indirect expense is given as 1400. I will compute what is the share of this. So 5 divided by 14 multiplied by 1400. This comes to 500. So accordingly here, 4 divided by 14 into 1400. It is 400. 5 divided by 14 into 1400. It is 500. So the indirect expense of each of the process, that also we have computed. Now let's prepare the process account. So on my left hand side, we'll start with first two materials, that is 3000. then to labor. Since it's an account, so we need to use the word to and by. To for the left hand side and by for the right hand side. Entry 2500 to direct expense 500. So in addition to this direct expense, we also had a to indirect expense. We already computed in the working note. So for process A it is 500 rupees. 500. That's it. So the total of all this, if you take up, we get 6500. Now this entire amount is transferred to process B by process B, or by transfer to process B. 6500. So in this problem there is nothing called as a normal loss or abnormal loss. We don't have anything of that kind. So the entire amount what we have incurred in process A, that is transferred to process B. Now on the debit side of process B, we have to say to process A, that is 6500. Now in case of process B, again what all things we have spent: material, labor, direct expenses and indirect expenses. So again I'll write here to material 1500, to labor 2000, to direct expense 100, to indirect expense. So the indirect expense in this case it is 400. So having done, again I'll take a total of all this. So you get 10,500. Again I say by transfer to process C, 10,500. So what is the amount we have spent in case of process B? Again that is captured along with the direct and indirect cost. Now when we move on to process C, again first we need to bring down the material transferred from the process B. So process C account debit to process B account, that is 10,500. Again the various costs that we have incurred here: to material 1000, to labor 2500, to direct expense 500, to indirect expense. So the indirect expense in this case is 500. Again if I take a total of all this, so I get 15,000. Now since this being the last process, so we will say by transfer to finished goods. Now the amount is 15,000. Since we have manufactured 500 items, so this 15,000, if it is divided by 500 items, so we come to know what is the cost per unit. So since it's the last process, so we need to find out what is the cost per item that we have manufactured by using this processor costing method, and it comes to 30 rupees. So in this problem, since it was the first problem, a very simple one, we wanted to just understand how the entries are made in 3 different process, when there is no normal loss, and when abnormal loss is not there, or when abnormal gain is not there, and when certain indirect expenses need to be apportioned based on certain ratio as such. So now let's move on to the second problem. Okay, so in the second problem also, so we have introduced some additional stuff apart from what we saw in the previous problem. So let's look into that. An article passes through 3 processes of manufacture during the week ended 15th March 2005. So 600 bottles are produced. The cost books shows the following information, that is the material, raw materials, direct labor, direct expenses. cost of bottles, cost of corks. So since we are manufacturing the bottles, so obviously the product, so at what particular stage the cost of bottle indirect material in terms of bottles is incurred is given, and the corks in order to fill up that particular top nozzle, so when that is introduced is mentioned in different process. The indirect expense for the period were 1600. The byproduct was sold for 240 in process 2 and the residue was sold for 125 in process 3. In this problem, so we are given like at the time of manufacturing in second process, certain amount of byproduct got generated and that is sold and the value is realized. Similarly, in third process, some residue has been generated and by selling it we have realized 125 rupees. So we need to capture these two things while preparing the process cost. Now again I have prepared the format ready to save the time. So let's start one by one. Let's go to the first process. Again here also, before we go for preparation of process costing, since the indirect expenses for the period is given as 1600, so if nothing is mentioned, again it is need to be recorded based on the direct labor cost. So again I just take one small working note. I just take the information what we did in the previous one. So computation of indirect expenses of processor. One, two, and 3. So here I will now mention process 1, process 2, process 3. Now the labor cost in this problem, here it is 3000, 2500, 2300. So if I take 2 zeros, if I remove 2 zeros from each of them, it comes to 30 is to 25 is to 23, and the total of all these if I take up, it comes to 78. Now the indirect expense given in this problem is 1600. So accordingly, what is the relative share of indirect expense for each process? That is 30 divided by 78. I just use a formula for a purpose of calculation. So this divided by 78 multiplied by 1600, and I just round it off to the nearest value. Similarly, here what I did, 25 divided by 78 multiplied by 1600. Next one, 23 divided by 78 multiplied by 1600. So I get the indirect expense cost. Now this I am going to use while recording. So let's start with the process 1. 2 raw materials. So in this case also we are not mentioning what is the cost per unit. So because the number of bottles manufactured is given as 600 and the raw material values are given, so I'll just take into the amount column. So 2 raw materials, 2 direct labor, two direct expenses, so cost of bottle is not there, cost of cork is not there, 2 indirect expenses, 615. Now in case of process 1, again we don't have any byproduct sale or residue sale. I just take the value total and I say by transfer to process 2, that is 9215. Now I bring that value to process 2. So process 2 account debit side to process 1, 9215. So again, to raw materials, in process 2 it is 3000, to direct labor 2500, to direct expenses 200. Now here the cost of bottle is given, to cost of bottles 2030, to indirect expense. Working note, we refer to the working note, it is 513. Now in the second process we have a sale of byproduct. So this will reduce the process 2 cost. So by sale of byproduct, that is 240 rupees. Now from the total debit 17,458, we need to minus the sale of byproduct. The remaining amount we say transfer to process 3. So from 17,458 minus 240 rupees, we get 17,218. Next, to process 3 account debit to process 2 account, that is 17,218. Again, write all the expenses connected to this process. To raw material 2000, to direct labor 2300, to direct expenses 500. Now here we don't have a cost of bottles, but we have cost of COGS. Cost of COGS 325, to indirect expense, that is 472. Now in the third process we are having the sale of residue. So let here by sale of residue 125 rupees. Now if we take the total 22,815 by transfer to goods, 22,815 minus 125. Now since we have manufactured 600 bottles, the cost per unit comes to 22,690 divided by 600, so 37.817. I just round it off to two values, 2 decimal places, so it comes to 37.82 per bottle. So it means cost of manufacturing the 600 bottles is 22,690, and the cost per unit of manufacturing the bottle is 37.82. So in this way we prepare the process accounts. Now let's go into slightly complex one. Now having understood how the process account is prepared, when we are manufacturing a given quantity by undergoing different processes, so it's easy. Now let's look into the next type. Now in this problem, if you observe third one, a product passes through 3 processes A, B and C. The following details are obtained for its manufacture. So you are given again 3 processes are there. Raw material entered is in tons. So here again in terms of how much quantity has been introduced. The cost per ton is given, that is 120 rupees per ton. Direct wages, direct expenses. Loss of tonnage due to processing. So when the product is undergoing the production activity, so due to processing, there is a loss of tonnage of 4%. output transfer to next process. So the out of 250 tons which is introduced, 4% of the tonnage is lost. So the remaining quantity out of that, 20% is transferred to next process and 80% is transferred to warehouse. In case of process B, again it is 5% is the loss of tonnage due to processing, 50% is transferred to next process, 50% is transferred to warehouse. In case of C process, it is 2.5% is a loss of tonnage. So since this being the last process, so hence the entire output is transferred to the warehouse. So when I given this kind of information wherein certain part of the quantity is transferred to warehouse, certain part of the output in a given process is transferred to the next process, so how do you capture this particular information? So let's do it. So again I have made a template ready, so that is going to save our time. So again I am going to mention here, that is first one, that is 2 raw material. So here, since the cost per ton of raw material is given 120 rupees per ton, and also the quantity is given here, I'll insert one more column. So quantity column also is given, so I will insert one additional column on both sides and write here quantity. So this is the third problem we are solving. Okay. Okay. So 2 raw materials. So 250 tons at the rate of 120. So that comes to 250 into 120, 30,000. Direct wages, that is 85,800. Then you are given direct expenses, 13,800. Now loss of tonnage due to processing. So by normal loss, it is 4%. So 4% is the loss. That is 0.04 into 250 tons. So that is 10 tons. So 10 tons being the normal loss. What is the value of this normal loss is not given. So we are going to just leave it blank. Now next is about output transfer to next process is 20%, transfer to warehouse is 80%. Now in order to find out how much is output transferred to warehouse and next process, by next process, that is by process B. Next is by warehouse, or I can say as a stock. So 20% is transferred to next process, that is 20% of out of 250 tons, 10 tons being the normal wastage, so 240. If I take up, that comes to 0.20 into 240, that is 48 tons. 80% of 240 is transferred to warehouse, that is 0.80 into 240, 192 tons. But what is the cost? So I just take the value of this one, rate 129600, Now what's the cost is a question. So the cost of this 48 tons and this 192 tons we need to ascertain. So this 1,29,600 is divided by the normal output, that is 250 minus 10, that is 240. So if I calculate that as a base, so we get like this. I'll just show you as working. 129,600 divided by 240, it comes to 540. So this 540 is the cost per ton. Okay, so I'll write now. So 540. So accordingly, so 48 tons multiplied by 440. Next is 192 tons into 540. So if you take the total of these two again, you will get the same value, 1,29,600. So I hope it is understood for you all. So this 540 is ascertained by dividing 1,29,600 by the good number of units, that is 250 tons minus 10 tons, we get 240. So that cost per unit of good units that need to be assigned to both of them. Now is to process B. So in the process B, so material transferred from process A we need to write up, that is 48 tons at the rate of 540, that is 25,920. Then in process B, again the raw material introduced is mentioned. So to raw material, again 152 tons we have introduced at the rate of 80. So 152 into 80. So direct wages, that is 20,250. To direct expenses 13,870. Now again in this process B, 5% is mentioned as the loss of tonnage. So it's called again by normal loss, that is 5%. So 5% means 0.055% of total tons, that is 48 and 152. If I take up, it comes to 200, that is 10 tons. Now the remaining tons, 50% is transferred to next process, 50% is transferred to warehouse. So by process C, 50% of, that is 190, because out of 200 tons, 10 tons is a normal loss, so 190 is left out. Similarly by warehouse, that is 50% of 190, 0.50 into 190 tons. Similarly here also it is 95 tons. Now what's the cost of this again? So again I'll just take the total. So I'll write the same total, 72,200. So this 72,200 is divided with good number of units, that is 190 tons. So we get 380. The same 380 is mentioned here, 380. So 95 tons into 380, we get 36,100. Similarly 95 tons into 380, 36,100. So in this way, in case of process B, the loss due to tonnage is captured, output transfer to next process is captured, and accordingly now we are supposed to move to the process C. Now in the process A again I'll write to process B, that is material received from process B 95 tons at the rate of 380, 36,100. Now here also we are infusing 145 tons at the rate of 50 rupees to raw materials. 145 tons at the rate of 50, 7,250. To direct wages 10,560. To direct expenses 2,250. Now in this process we are having only 2.5% as a loss of tonnage. So I write here by normal loss, that is 2.5%. Now this 2.5%, 0.025 into, if I add up these two quantities, so I get a, that is 145 plus 95, I get 240, that is 6 tons. So 6 tons is the normal loss in process C. Now by transferred to warehouse, because we don't have next process, so what is the output is going to occur in this particular C process, the entire output is going to be transferred to the next process, that is to the warehouse. So out of 240 total, so if I minus normal loss quantity 6 tons, so 234 tons is transferred to the next, that is to the warehouse. So 56,160. 56,160. So the cost per ton comes to 240 rupees. So in this way, so now in the third problem what did we learn was, in case if there is a normal loss, and if the normal loss value, the scrap value or the normal loss realizable value is not given, so we should not calculate, we should just mention how much is the normal loss quantity, and the remaining output, the good number of units, in case out of that if certain part is transferred to warehouse, certain part is transferred to the next process, so how the computation is to be done and recorded. Now moving on to the next is still more complex kind of a problem, so wherein we now actually move on to the understanding how the normal loss computation, abnormal loss computation, abnormal gain if it is given, and also how do we record all this information in the process costing. So let's move on to the fourth problem. For all the problems I have created a template, so that it is going to save a lot of our time and we can spend quality time on the discussion front. Okay, let's look into the fourth one. A product passes through 3 processes to completion. In January 1996, the cost of production were given as below. So in case of process 1, input 1000 units, amount 5000 rupees, direct material, wages, production overheads, normal wastage is 10%, scrap value of normal wastage is given per unit, it is 3 rupees, 5 rupees, 6 rupees. Actual output is 920 units, 870 units in the processor 2 and 800 units in the process 3. So why this actual output is mentioned here, and what's the relevance of this one? Now if you look into the first heading, input is 1000 units. If the input is 1000 units, so normally we feel like output also should be 1000 units, but since there is a normal wastage of 10%, so it means out of 1000 units, if 10% means 100 units are is a normal loss, so actually we should get 900 units as an output. But what has happened here is we have received 920 units as an output, which means if the normal output and actual output, when we compare, if the normal output, if the actual output is more than the normal output, then we say there is an abnormal gain. On the other hand, if the actual output is less than the normal output, then we say it is an abnormal loss. Okay, so what does it mean and how we are going to do all those calculations, we'll show you. Now, before we move on to the preparation of process account 1, 2, 3, so we need to first understand, given a case of normal wastage, given the actual output for all the three processes, so let's first find out, so is there an abnormal gain, abnormal loss in each of these processes. So I'll just first put the working note. So this is the first working note which I have prepared here. It's computation of output considering the normal loss, normal output considering the normal loss. Now this all calculation what it is, I am just going to show you once again. Now when I given out three processes, the input quantity in first process is 1000. If the input quantity is 1000 units, the normal loss here it is 10%. So in case of a process 1, so if it is 10% means 10% of 1000, if I calculate, it is 100 units. Then obviously the output should be from 1000 units input. If I minus 100 unit as a normal loss, so output should be 900. This is a normal output, but actually we have received 920 units as an actual output, which means 20 units are surplus. So we call this as an abnormal gain, or it's also called an effective units. Now when these actual output of 920 units are processed in the next process 2, so the input becomes 920. If the input is 920 in process 2, again the normal loss in process 2 is 5%, that is 0.05 into 920, so 46 units is a normal loss. So the normal output should be 920 minus 46, it is 874, which means we are supposed to get 874 units, but we have actual output is just 870, so there is a gap, 4 unit we have received less, so we call this as abnormal loss. Next, when these 870 units are moved to the process C, that is process 3, so 870 becomes a input. Now again the normal loss in process third is 10%, 0.10 into 870, so it 87 units. Therefore the normal output should be, out of 870 minus 87, it should be 783 units, but the actual output that we got is 800 units, which means if the actual output is more than the normal output, again it is called an abnormal gain. So 800 minus 783, so we have received in all 17 units more. So these 17 units happens to be your abnormal gain. Now having understood how many is the abnormal gain, abnormal loss units, what is the value of this abnormal gain and abnormal loss units that we need to compute. So that we are going to do as a separate working note when you come to each of these process calculation. Now at this stage we understood, like in first process there is abnormal gain, in second process there is abnormal loss, and in the third process again there is abnormal gain, and we are supposed to prepare process account, abnormal loss account and abnormal gain account. Okay, let's start with one by one. First process, input to material input, that is 1000 units, so 5000 is the amount. To direct material 2000, to wages 3500, to production overheads 1500. Now, having recorded the different cost, now let's move to the credit side. Normal wastage, so by normal loss. So since we already calculated all these things in a working note, it is 10%, that is 100 units. Now this normal loss 100 units are fetching a scrap value, that is 3 rupees per unit. So amount comes to 300. Now we have abnormal gain to abnormal gain. So in this problem we are having a gain. Okay, so what is the value of this abnormal gain? Now in order to compute the abnormal gain, so how much is our abnormal gain quantity? So if we see on the working note, 20 units are our abnormal gain. So write here 20 units. So what is the value of this abnormal gain units? So we should go with the working note. So computation of abnormal gain. So the value of abnormal gain is equal to total cost minus scrap value of normal loss divided by input units minus normal loss units multiplied by abnormal gain units. Now, so here I'll write total cost. What is this total cost is all about? The total cost is sum total of all on the debit side, that is 12,000. Here it is given 12,000 rupees. 12,000 minus scrap value of normal loss, that is 300, divided by input units 1000 minus normal loss units 100. So this whole answer need to be multiplied with the abnormal gain units. So I'll put a formula here, and here I'll write into abnormal gain units, that is 20 units. So get 260 rupees. So it's a not the cost per unit, it's a total amount, that is 260. I'll repeat, I'll show you how this calculation has been done. So here it is 12,000, this is the total cost, minus 300 divided by input units 1000 minus normal loss units multiplied by abnormal gain units. So the answer that we get is 260, which is written here. Now if I take a total, so I get 12,260. I'll take the quantity total 1020, 12,260. Now I'll write here by process 2. So by process 2 we get 920. That is 1020 minus 100 is 920. So 12,260 minus 300, 11,960. So per unit, if you want, you can write or you can leave it, doesn't matter. Next, to process 1 account. So this is brought down, carried on. So from process by process 2 carried on, so it is brought down here. So again I write here quantity So 920 units, amount 11,960. So again in the process 2 we have direct material, wages, production, overheads. To direct materials 3020, to wages 4226, to production overheads 2000 over. Now in the process B what has happened? So here also we are having a normal loss, that is 5%. So we already calculated normal loss 5% in the working note. So normal loss is 46 units, and here we are having a abnormal loss 4 units. So first let me put up the normal loss details. So normal loss it is 5%. So again I'll show you the calculation once again. 0.05 into 920, 46 units. Now the normal loss value is given as 5 rupees per unit. So it comes to 46 into 5, 230 by abnormal loss. So already we calculated is 4 units. So in the below working note I have shown you the 4 units is the abnormal loss. Now what is the value of this abnormal loss unit? So again we will go with the working note, that is computation of abnormal loss. So total cost minus scrap value of normal loss divided by input unit minus normal loss unit multiplied by abnormal loss units. So I'll put the values is equal to, now the total cost, when I say total cost again you add up all this, I get 21,206. So I'll write here 21,206 minus normal loss, scrap value of normal loss 230 divided by input units, that is 920 minus normal loss units 46. So if I do all this calculation and multiply, and put a multiplication sign and multiply with 4, so I get the value of a abnormal loss, that is 96 rupees. Now how many number of good units by process 3? So in the working note we have already mentioned the actual output in this case is 800. So if you take the total here also, so it is 920. So out of 920, sorry, the actual output is 874. 871, sorry, it is 870, sorry. So out of 920, so if I minus the 50 units, so out of 920, so 50 units are taken out, so it is 870. This is our actual output. So the value of this actual output 21,206, 21,206 minus 230 minus 96. So if you want, you can write per unit cost 24 is the cost per unit. Now finally we are in process 3 to process 2. So number of units brought from process 2 is 870, 24 per unit, that comes to 20,880. Now again, to direct material 3462, to direct wages 5,000, to production overheads 2,500. So in this problem in process 3, what is that we are supposed to understand is, again we have normal loss by normal loss. So working note, I just go to the working note. We have 87 units in the normal loss and we are having abnormal gain of 17 units. So 87 units in the normal loss, that is 10%. So 10% of 875 do, again it is a 87. Cost per unit is 6 rupees. So 87 into 6, it is 522. Now we are having abnormal gain to abnormal gain. So number of abnormal gain units here are 17. What is the value of these? 17 units. Again, formula, same formula I am going to write here and calculate the value. So the total of all this, if I take up 31,842, 31,842 minus, it is 522 value of normal loss, divided by input is 870 units, normal loss is 87 units, multiply with the abnormal gain units, so get 680. So finally I'll take the total. Even I take the total of the quantity 887, 32,522 by finished goods account. So from 887 minus 87, so we get 800 units, that is actual output. The value 32,522 minus 522, we get 32,000. Again the cost per unit, if you want to calculate 32,000 divided by 800, you get 40 rupees. So in this way, whenever you are given a normal loss and you are given actual output, and when you are given the scrap value of a normal wastage, so we need to do first homework is, first you prepare a working note to understand what is in which process we have abnormal gain, in which process we have abnormal loss. So by doing this working note, which is one of the important working note to begin with, so once we are through with this particular working note, then we should start going for preparing the process account. And the formula is also very simple to calculate abnormal gain and abnormal loss. So total cost on the debit side, debit total, and the simple way of remembering debit total minus the credit side normal loss value divided by input quantity minus normal loss quantity. So if you do this much, only this part of the calculation if you do, you will get what is known as cost of good units, cost per unit of good units. That if you multiply with whether it's abnormal gain or abnormal loss, you get accordingly the respective value. Now having completed preparing 3 process accounts, we are supposed to do 2 more accounts, that is abnormal loss and abnormal gain account. So this is also a very simple one. Now whatever the posting we have made in a respective process account, so we need to just transfer them into these 2 accounts. Now when you look into the first one, first process, so in process 1 we are having 2 abnormal gain, that is 260 rupees. So abnormal gain account on the credit side by process 1. So by process 1, that is 260 rupees. Similarly, in process 3 also we are having a abnormal gain. So process 3, account debit to abnormal gain 680, I'll write here, by process 3 680. Now, having posted to the abnormal gain account by process 1 and process 3, now in case this particular abnormal gain what we have posted, in case if the normal loss and scrap value is given with regarding to the process, so we need to recover it from the abnormal gain account. So in the process 1, so abnormal gain is mentioned and this is abnormal loss of 300. So transfer that there is a normal loss of 300, so this normal loss is transferred to abnormal gain. So abnormal gain account debit side to normal loss from the process 1, that is 300 rupees. Similarly, in the process 3, again we have abnormal gain and there is a normal loss of 522. So this normal loss of 522 is also recovered from the abnormal gain account. Normal loss. This is process 3 and this is of a process 1. $522. Now if you take a total, so it is 940. So write 940. The difference amount is transferred to costing profit and loss account. 940 minus 300 minus 522. So 118 rupees is transferred to costing P&L account. So in which process there is abnormal gain, so the normal loss of that particular process is recovered, and whatever the balance is left, that is transferred to costing profit and loss account. Whereas in case of process B, process 2, there is abnormal loss. So this particular abnormal loss, if you observe here, in process 2 is 96 rupees. So abnormal loss account is credited by 96 rupees here. So what I'll do now, abnormal loss account on the debit side, abnormal loss account debit to process 2, 96 rupees. So in case if this abnormal loss units, if they are fetching some value, then we could have mentioned what is the scrap value by selling this. So since nothing is given in terms of any recovery, so this entire amount is to be transferred to profit and loss account. So by costing P&L account, 96 rupees. In this way, by preparing abnormal loss account and abnormal gain account, so we are completing this particular problem. So some of the learnings from this particular problem is in terms of how to find out whether a particular process has abnormal gain or abnormal loss, then how to quantify that particular abnormal gain, abnormal loss, then how to prepare the abnormal loss and abnormal gain account. So in the same approach, we have the fifth problem here. I am just keeping fifth problem for you to go through, and in the same fashion what we have done for this problem number 4, I request you people also can try it out, and in case if you have any query, you can always mail me your doubts, so I can answer back to your mail. So just have a look here. This is a solution for fourth one. The fifth problem is also similar one what you had just now discussed. So if you practice this one, so you'll understand how we have solved the fourth one. The working notes are very essential, so you need to prepare working notes properly so that you'll understand and it will be easy for you to prepare the process accounts. So thank you for watching the video. So if you have any query, you can always mail me to my email ID maheshb@globalbschool.in. Thank you.